Hi YouTube, Tamara here, and I am using a different platform this time because Google Hangouts is being a major prick. So hopefully this will work for us, and maybe this will be something I'll use more in the future. Today we have Jeffrey Cook with us. He is an indie author from the West, or at least he's based in the West Coast now. He lives in Maple Valley, Washington with his wife and 3 large dogs. He was born in Boulder, Colorado, but has lived all over the U.S. His mother says he wanted to be an author since he was 6 years old, but he began writing professionally in 2014. In addition to his novels and anthology projects, he has contributed material to publications by games out of Seattle, Washington. When not reading, researching, or writing, Jeffrey enjoys role-playing games and watching football. Thank you so much for joining me, Jeff.
Hey, thank you for doing this.
We have been trying to connect for like months.
Since March.
Yeah, this is crazy. But I'm glad that we finally got this together. Jeff, you have a number of projects that you're working on. Like, I guess like all good indie authors should. You do not have all your eggs in one basket. So do you want to tell us a little bit about the Dawn of Steam trilogy?
Sure. Sure, I will start with that. The Dawn of Steam novels were my first books. It is a 3-book series. It is very early era steampunk or emergent steampunk set from 1815 to 1819. And one of the big differentiating things in the novels, they are epistolary format, which means they are all letters and journal entries from the characters. So they are in Regency voice and telling the stories through that format of a group of adventurers on board the airship Dame Fortuna as they end up exploring a lot of the parts of the world that weren't known in 1815 to 1819 during the Regency era and the pre-Victorian years.
Cool. So would you say that you are a steampunk writer?
I'm definitely branching out a lot more now. Steampunk is certainly a big part of my writing. Between Dawn of Steam, my first project for Writerpunk Press was steampunk, and a lot of my short stories are in with my co-author, or Luca and Emily, Victorian steampunk series. So it's certainly kind of a big chunk of my writing.
I love to read steampunk. I think that it is so fascinating and creative, and steampunk and cyberpunk and I don't know, all the punks. But you mentioned Writerpunk
Press.
Tell us a little bit about Writerpunk Press.
Okay, so Writerpunk Press was a project that started last year from a bunch of the people on the NaNoWriMo Facebook group, that we were all punk writers, essentially, in, as you described, the punk genres of science fiction: cyberpunk, steampunk, dieselpunk, Tesla punk, and the list goes on and on. And we go into that within each of the books a little bit of, okay, what is punk? What makes something punk? But we got together and started our own group to discuss just those varieties of sci-fi rather than the much more general nanoboards. And one of the members, Asias Glaster, suggested maybe we could do an anthology within the group for fun. We eventually got that together. I became a major kind of organizational force, I guess, as well as one of the authors. And March this year published our first charity anthology, Sound and Fury, Shakespeare Goes Punk, Volume 1. That is 5 stories that are adaptations of Shakespeare plays into the punk genres of science fiction. We've got Cyberpunk Macbeth, we have a couple of diesel punk stories, we have a Tesla punk Tempest, and the book finishes with my steampunk version of The Winter's Tale. We are let's see, 7 days now from the submission deadline for the second charity anthology, which will be Once More Unto the Breach, Shakespeare Goes Punk Volume 2. And then we are doing Edgar Allan Poe early next year. All of the Writerpunk project works. The profits go to charity. I'm also sort of the liaison for that, since it is going to a charity which is really close to my heart, Paws Animal Shelter and Rescue in Linwood, Washington. So it is for a good cause. We have a full team of editors. We have 20 to 30 some authors now involved at various levels. We have formatting. We have artists. Everybody is donating all of their time to help charity and to help get the different authors' names out there.
These sound like awesome reads. First of all, I love Winter's Tale, and I'm a huge Poe fan, so I'm definitely looking forward to that one. Maybe I'll try my hand at some type of punk reimagining of a Poe story.
Please do. Yeah, we have the forums all set up with who is doing what, and we're always looking for new potential authors for submitting to any of the volumes. Future projects in the works beyond Poe, we're going to try and do 2 of these a year. We've got classics coming late next year, and then 2017 we'll probably see another Shakespeare, and we're starting to kick around ideas for like maybe a classics of horror.
Oh. So it sounds like you are pretty good with networking with other authors, kind of making those kind of connections and starting projects. And I think that one of the things that indie authors may not be as comfortable with is doing that, kind of reaching out to other authors. How did you go about pulling in all of these different people and kind of making, well, 2 almost anthologies? How did you go about doing that?
Well, I do a bunch of different networking things, and they all started very differently. My original sort of networking thing was I joined Free Valley Publishing, which is a group of currently 8 authors from my immediate area, who I met one of them at a NaNoWriMo event, and she invited me to come talk to the group. They liked the look of my books, invited me to join. I have also joined the Northwest Independent Writers Association, which is mostly Portland and Vancouver, Washington based, but does extend up through Seattle here. So writers groups are a part of it. The Writerpunk Press really grew out of kind of the nano side group. And then I've started, because I have a friendly venue here, started hosting events that I invite 7 other authors to come into and do on a rotating basis at a local kind of geek bar and tavern, and just kind of do sales events 4 times a year. I also do a lot of conventions and have partnered with different authors to share table space. The idea for that kind of came from the fact that the Northwest Independent Writers at every Worldcon down in Portland in November has a big co-op table for the organization. So I started talking to different authors and just saying, okay, what sort of events, could we do and share table space? Because I've really found that having more books on the table attracts attention. People will stop when they see one particular thing, and a lot of people don't buy just one book, or they will buy something different than what they stopped for, or they will come back to a convention the following year, to pick something else up. So as a cooperative venture, I think I've done a lot better than most of the tables I've seen with, one author and just a couple of books or a few books. And it certainly cuts down on the costs of, okay, so it's a $300 table. So, each of the 4 or 5 people involved pays a share of that, so no one person is on the hook for the full amount. It's now to the degree when I go to Worldcon in Spokane in about 3 weeks here, there will be 28 authors represented at my table.
Wow.
So that's really grown.
That's amazing. I think that with the advent of the internet and so many people using social media, that sometimes these face-to-face events kind of get pushed to the wayside because of things like prohibitive costs and travel and things like that. So, as you've mentioned, one way that you've worked around it is by collaborating with other authors and partnering and sharing the cost of the table. I'm assuming that a Worldcon table is probably pretty expensive.
The Worldcon table is extremely expensive because it is a very big, very well-known convention. They have people who do travel from all over the world to get to it. I got this table originally because I graduated from Sandpoint, Idaho, Sandpoint High School, right near Spokane. So I figured that I would have, some family and friends likely to come. So I kind of took the risk, paid the $150 deposit that's just there to hold on to a table space, not even remotely paying for the full table. And then figured that I could invite a few other authors to kind of share the cost and hopefully make it back. And it just kind of kept growing after I found out that pretty much nobody else from around here had gotten a table.
So you kind of trailblazed a little bit.
I kind of did, and then Worldcon has been really, really helpful in every time we've hit certain thresholds. They say, hey, for another, $300, we'll give you another 10-foot table. So our space has just kind of grown, and we're now well beyond their, booth space, which was the original biggest space that they were offering, and we kind of outgrew that. So they gave us an offer for an additional table above and beyond that.
So will all of the authors be attending?
No, I think we're going to have about 15 of the 28 there. And then, I'm bringing books for some of the Free Valley authors and a couple of other authors who've become friends. A bunch of the NIWA, the Northwest Independent Writers Association, people will be there, including probably my most frequent partner in crime when it comes to doing con tables. She and I do a lot of conventions together at this point. We'll be doing even more next year. So I have somebody that I'm familiar with and kind of know her habits and familiar with her work that is also planning to be working the table almost the entire weekend. Well, weekend plus, since it's kind of a 6-day long convention.
Wow.
So.
And since you have family there, you'll be there for the full 6 days?
Yeah, the setup starts on Tuesday. That's like the 17th or 18th of August. And then it runs through Sunday. So,
that's
yeah, it is a big one, and it's a long convention. So it's the longest event I've worked to 2 days has been 3-day events. So this will be interesting.
That sounds like quite the haul. That's a job.
It is definitely work. It's like the writing and everything. It's fun work, but it's work.
So, for people who haven't attended any type of con like this, can you tell us what it's like, or how you set up the table, how you try to work the crowd? What do you do when you get there?
So the first and biggest thing I would say for anybody venturing into looking at working conventions as an author is find a con buddy. Find somebody you are comfortable working with, that you have a good rapport with, can work out a working relationship with, so that you can, get up, leave the table, go attend or do panels or something like that and have somebody there. After that, it's kind of a boom and bust sort of thing. You're behind the table, you're talking to people, and most of the conventions seem to kind of go in waves. You have long periods of silence where it feels like you're not going to sell anything, and then suddenly your table is flooded and you're trying to talk to everybody, which is another reason to have somebody there with you that you'll really trust and can work with. And I think some of it goes to the logic of nothing attracts a crowd like a crowd. But there's also the fact that when big panels let out, you'll have a rush of people going to the vendor room or something like that. You also being very polite and not pushing too hard early helps a lot, because a lot of the people going through the vendor room for the first time aren't there to shop. They're there to figure out, with their budgeting, how much they have, and then they'll come back. So interacting with people and handing out business cards and being polite is really important, whether people buy or not. As far as approach, so far at conventions, by far the best thing that I found is, let people browse a little bit. Start with, okay, hello, let them know they're free to pick up the books and look through things. They're free to ask questions. And then let them read through the backs of books. Let them look through stuff. Let them kind of guide the conversation from there. I've worked with a couple of people who are much more hard sell types, and I really don't find that it works very well. So, good.
What do you bring with you?
Okay, so I try to always bring, like, carbonated water is a big one for me, because you're going to be talking a lot. And having something that's kind of throat soothing and staying hydrated is really important. Bring books, bring business cards, bring anything you have for, like, bookmarks or postcards or other things that you can just give away for free at a minimal cost that, might help highlight the books. Bring things to create a little bit of table interest to get people to stop. The most successful thing we've found so far is a Rubik's Cube, and just, mess it up, and people will stop and try and solve it. And then they'll stop and talk to you or look through things that otherwise might not have. I'm trying to get kind of a miniature made of one of the characters from one of my books. My most frequent con partner has some dragons that she had printed with a 3D printer.
So cool.
It's just amazing if you can get people to stop and kind of engage with something on the table. That's really kind of the first biggest step. And you really, even if they don't buy something, it really is helpful to have people stopping and engaging a little bit, because some will come back, and if nothing else, it does help kill some of the boredom of those long lulls, because those are terrible, and you really actually do need to be looking up and looking at people and engaging with them. Don't be working on your phone. Don't be looking at a notebook, because if somebody is not there to engage with, people will just keep walking by.
Yeah, that's an important thing to think about. Maybe not using your phone as much.
Yeah. The other things to bring, aside from just books and whatnot, and your supporting material, make sure that you have pens that work, and bring a phone with a Square or other credit card reader, and make sure that you have all of the books that are going to be at the table plugged into the Square, because it will do a lot of your record keeping and things like that for you. And the one that I'm having to remember is, even with cash sales, always load it into your Square, because it'll keep the records for you.
Oh, okay. And those you can order online, can't you?
You can order those online, and they cost, I think mine was something like $7.50. And it costs like 12 cents out of each sale or something minimal. It's well worth it.
Yeah, I think that's within most authors' budgets.
Yeah, it's really not expensive at all. I'm probably going to be buying a second one here, so I have a spare just in case.
Mm-hmm.
But at conventions, you're going to get a mix of people paying cash and credit card. And that's the other thing, is bring change, especially fives and ones. Because you will have people paying cash, and you need to be able to make change. So,
You know, those are things that, little things that are so important.
they are, yeah.
Being able to handle change. I know that with events that I've hosted, that I think the first one I ever did, I hadn't gotten change. So it was like, it was a mess. It was a mess. And it was a little embarrassing having to ask people, so, hey, do you have change for this tent? Like,
Well, and that's the other thing with change that I found, is figure out what the local tax rates are and technically adjust the price of your books up or down a little bit to come out to even dollar amounts, so that you're just making change in paper money and not trying to handle coins. I've worked with some people who have their books on sale at conventions for like $12.99 or something, and it's a mess.
that's a very good tip. Very good tip. So tell us a little bit about From Bouquets to Bullets.
Okay, so Mina Cortez, From Bouquets to Bullets, was my first non-steampunk book. It is also my first traditionally published book. It is published through Fire and Ice Young Adult Publishing out of Minnesota. They are the young adult imprint of Melange Books. After self-publishing the Dawn of Steam series, I decided I really wanted to try and see what the other side of the coin looked like, and take the time to submit to agents and to submit to publishers. And that one was published as a result of a direct publisher submission. Was actually my third submission, so that one didn't take very long to be picked up, which I know is not very typical. Most people, I guess, average about 40-some rejections, which is kind of what I was getting with Dawn of Steam, but it's a really unusual format. So I think I got kind of lucky as far as Mina being picked up pretty early. It is a young adult science fiction novel with not only the lead, but both of the main characters being teenage girls. So it is female-fronted, and it is sort of a science fiction mystery, I suppose, very Earth-based, with most of the kind of science fiction side of it being built around skill chips, which are microchips which are implanted and give somebody the knowledge and some of the reflex actions to do a job, whereas most of the schooling has become learning what are your aptitudes, what are you well suited for, what could you do for the rest of your life, and being, designed to pick up on those aptitudes and what people can do very well, and then assigning them the chips to help in their career or give them the actual job skills and knowledge for their career. So Mina has been training at a very high level for most of her life to try and earn one of the chips that will get her an invitation to one of the big ballet companies. That's what she really wants to do, and is a very physically demanding job, but has been worried for most of her life she really just doesn't have the body type for it, since she's fairly short and stocky. And now that she's turning 18, hasn't gotten that last growth spurt, is pretty sure she's going to end up inheriting her parents' flower shop, which she knows the job she can do. She's been working as a delivery girl for them, but it's not really what she wants to do. And due to her specific skills, physical training, and knowledge and familiarity that she has, she actually ends up getting one of the Inquisitor chips, giving her all of the skills and knowledge to be a super spy, with her cover identity being a flower delivery girl working for her parents' flower shop, because that allows her an excuse to be pretty much anywhere at any time.
That sounds like so much fun.
It's a fun book, and it's reviewed really, really well so far.
Awesome. So, what has been the major differences so far between going at it on your own and having that traditional publishing?
Well, some of it I've actually found, even just being able to say that, I'm a hybrid, that I have something traditionally published, has actually made a really, really big difference at conventions and things like that. People will, look at some of my other books like they have a little bit more legitimacy, I suppose. Being able to say I have a professional editor, I have passed that hurdle, I guess, and gotten somebody else, a professional press, to agree that my work is worth publishing, which I guess indie and self-published works have a bad reputation with the ease of self-publishing. There is some pretty, bad non-edited books out there, and it can be very hard for people, I guess, to distinguish, what is the better stuff, what's not. So I guess just being able to say that has certainly been helpful at times. Some of the other differences, I make much less per sale on the Mina Cortez stuff because the publisher takes a cut. The costs for initially ordering books are higher. They set all of the prices, so it ends up, a different price than a lot of my other stuff on Amazon. And I haven't had, I guess, some of the avenues for pushing it that I have on some of the other things. I didn't get to set the publishing date. On the other hand, they paid for the cover art and had an in-house designer doing that. They assigned an editor to it, which didn't take very long because I have my own professional editor who does a really good job, who had already gone through it. So it was mostly adapting to their house style and doing a few suggested cleanup things that they had. So it's definitely been kind of a learning experience. I've gone kind of back to self-publishing with my series after that. I kind of like having some of the control aspects, and without a whole lot of, huge marketing push from the publisher, which is pretty typical. Most publishers don't do a ton of marketing outside of pushing their big names anymore. Mm-hmm. I've gotten fairly comfortable with that, but if the right circumstances for a future book were to come up, traditional publishing is certainly something I would consider again.
So then it has been a positive experience for you.
I think so. It's been a good learning experience. I really have enjoyed, getting some of the input and feedback, and working with particularly Carolyn from Fire and Ice, who's been very supportive. And like I said, even just having it has helped to sell some of my other books as well. And Mina has been doing fairly well at, a lot of like the live conventions and things like that, which it got a little bit of a push from the Twitter group, We Need Diverse Books, and has gotten some attention from locally, just Seattle being what it is, from both some of the local Hispanic and Asian American populations. Given that the featured heroines are Mexican American and Japanese American, respectively. And We Need Diverse Books is a fairly large group, or the tag gets a fair amount of attention on Twitter. So that's certainly been kind of a helpful push too.
So your newest book is Foul is Fair?
Yes. Foul is Fair was released just a little bit over a month ago. It is my second young adult book. It also has a lead female character, Megan O'Reilly, and probably the sidekick character as well, Lonnie Kahale. So, a couple of lead females as well as a fairly large cast of supporting characters, I suppose, mixing both humans and some fairies, because it is very much rooted in it's a modern urban fantasy set in Seattle, while featuring a lot of Celtic mythology and old style fairy tales. And as the book series progresses, more and more of world mythology and world fairy tales, starting with the first book, while a lot of it is Celtic. We have one character who's Grecian, and then Lonnie is Hawaiian and is half Menehune. So we get into Hawaiian mythology and the Hawaiian fairy tales and the Menehune magic and the mythology and stories behind them, and have some points in the story where Lonnie's ability to engineer or build almost anything, as long as everybody else is sleeping, all of the non-Menehune are not watching, and she only has one night to do it. So anything that's not finished when somebody else wakes up, the project is done. She can't do it anymore. Because, that's a lot of the tales of the Menehune, where, they were the explanations for structures in Hawaii, but the Menehune crews would work for one night and things that weren't finished when dawn came, or when they were interrupted by a human wandering in. The project was done, they weren't doing anymore. So they're these phenomenal builders, but they have limitations on their magic, and either can't or won't do stuff after that one night is over, which was the traditional Hawaiian stories for why some of these temples were unfinished.
Oh.
So we very much play into that with Lonnie of, when she's really building something or needs to work on something or figure something out. Okay, everybody else needs to go to sleep, and I'll work on it tonight. And, if somebody wakes up early or something else, okay, it's done. Whatever I have is what I have.
It's interesting. Why did you decide to have such a diverse kind of cast of characters, people all over the world?
Well, okay, so there's really two reasons. First of all is I find that it kind of reflects my reality. Seattle is a really, really diverse area. We're right on the Pacific Rim. We have a huge Asian population. We have, a very big, very vocal LGBTQ crowd. We have a lot of Mexican Americans who've come up through California and settled here. And just people from all over the world, Eastern and Southern Europe populations. So when you go into Seattle and various places, there's a very big international district. And it's not unusual to see people of just about any ethnic origin or diverse in all sorts of other ways here, and just among my friends, and the people that I regularly associate with. It's not just white people or just males or just straight people or anything else. With fair folk, the main character, Megan O'Reilly, had a specific genetic origin, I suppose. She is, very Irish and possibly descended from the goddess Bridget. So, she's very much, white American, but her best friend is Hawaiian, but that reflects a fair amount of the people in Seattle. And certainly, my group of friends and the people that I hang out with. With, like, Mina Cortez, I really didn't set out heavily to try and force diversity into the cast. Mina actually started from, or the reason it's Mina Cortez, started from the origin of the story started with some friends hanging out and somebody making a Monty Python reference and going into the nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. Somebody else, because my friends saying, so what if nobody really did expect the Spanish Inquisition, including the Inquisition? How would that work? So I started into this book originally titled The Accidental Inquisitor, trying to explain how that would work.
Oh.
But because of the Spanish and Hispanic origins of the reference, she very much took on being Mina Cortez right away. And ended up Mexican American. So it's not really, the books are not necessarily about, diversity or diversity issues or anything else. They're adventure stories, they're sci-fi, they're fantasy. They're about the adventures and the mythology that just happen to have characters that very much reflect the reality of living in Seattle.
Have you found that your readers, do they ever comment on the diversity in your books or the strong female characters that you write?
So, yes, I have just had probably two of my favorite experiences as an author. Because honestly, being an indie author is not a quick route to fame and money and success that way. But it is the most rewarding job I've ever had. And probably two of the recent experiences that really highlight that. So I went to kind of two events back to back. One was Maple Valley Days here in Maple Valley, just kind of a local fair, and was selling books there. And went through and sold actually quite a few books, but especially to teen readers. I went up to the Fremont Fair the week after that, much, much bigger fair up in Fremont, Washington. And at one point had somebody come up to me, was about 15, 16 years old, really, really quiet, really, really shy, and shuffling nervously the entire time they were talking to me. And I had to lean way over to the table to hear them, but was just saying, so, you probably won't remember me, but I was with my friends at Maple Valley Days, and they were asking questions about, characters with alternate sexualities and gender identities. So I heard that. I didn't say anything, but I bought Phallus Fair on ebook after that. And when I heard you were going to be here, I had to come over because I wanted to say thank you for writing Care, because there's finally somebody in fiction like me.
Oh.
So having that character who's very much a supporting character, not one of the main cast even, but is non-gender identifying, very, very androgynous within the book, really, touched one of my readers and was important, despite not playing a huge role in the story, just having them there. So that was cool. And then my favorite review of all time just came in on Phallus Fair, 5-star, from somebody who saying, okay, so I'm a huge reader, and throughout time I've always said, okay, this book is my favorite for this. This book is my favorite for this, but I haven't had any one favorite. And now I finally figured out why, because I've never been able to really identify with the characters. And then I picked up this, fantasy book that was something that I would have read anyway, and read about this character, this main character with ADHD. And I finally, clicked with the character and saw this adventure and saw somebody who was like me that I could relate to. And, it didn't cripple them and even played into some of their strengths. So this is now my favorite book. Thank you. So there are the times that sort of thing is important. And again, I don't really set out to make it, that's not what the book is about. But I think it's important to have there and have characters readers can identify with.
representation is important, regardless of whether it's fiction or nonfiction. It's important for people to be able to see themselves reflected in literature. There's, I don't know, it's like a certain amount of, like, you're being acknowledged that you exist,
Mm-hmm.
and people like you exist, and that's important, especially for young people.
Well, yeah, and I mean, growing up as, okay, mostly white American male, I mean, that's kind of the target audience for a lot of fiction. But I got to have, at various times, living on, an Indian reservation, having a very racially mixed step family, moving to the Northwest and having a very diverse group of friends, really got to see that and how important it was. And I've had a couple of people, ask me if, okay, as a white male reader, is it hard to write, strong female characters? Is it hard to write a Mexican American, and so on and so on. And I guess my standard response is, I don't even think about that. I just write people. And so far, I seem to have done pretty well with it.
Fantastic. So I like to ask people when I bring them on here, what kind of advice would you give to up-and-coming indie authors who are trying to make their way in this uncharted territory?
Okay, so biggest pieces of advice. First of all, if it's not one of your talents, try and find somebody, whether it's a friend who's good at that, a professional. Try and find somebody to edit your work who's not you. Having that unbiased or less biased set of eyes and looking at your own work, you're going to miss things. Get feedback from beta readers and people who are not heavily biased in favor of your work or who will give you an honest opinion. And the one caveat I will say with that is when you give stuff to beta readers, when you give stuff to people to read, a lot of people will beta read and tell you what they didn't like. Remind them to tell you their favorite parts too, or the things they did like, so you can do, more of it or work with that. Or most importantly, you don't cut that, because I've had something where I got beta feedback from 5 different readers, and so I changed things, based on the things that two or more people said, and went back to a second round of betas and had somebody say, well, why did you cut out my favorite part? You didn't tell me that was your favorite part, and that was the easiest way to change it to fix, these 3 comments. So getting positive feedback is important too. After editing, if visual art is not one of your strengths, hire or find an artist to put cover art together, because as much as people say, don't judge a book by its cover, people do. And an eye-catching cover is people's first impression of your book. And to me, more importantly, even if people are not judging the whole book by its cover, it does give an important value judgment in, a sloppy or thrown together cover will give people the impression that the author didn't care enough about the book to do a good job or present a professional outward appearance. So finding outside editing and outside cover art, unless that really is your strengths. And I know authors who those are their strength. I know 3 people that I would trust to self-edit consistently. And one of them wrote a book on self-editing. And I know a number of people who are good at visual art as well, or are photographers. But if that's not in your skill set, those are things that you really need to hire out or find friends or find somebody else to do. But other than that, that's pretty much the first advice, aside from just write the best books you can and don't just throw your first draft out there. Do the rewrites, respond to betas, and take the time to put out a quality professional book inside and out.
Awesome. Well, Jeff, this has been a great interview. It was well worth the wait. I will leave links in the description box that has your website and your Amazon and Writerpunk Press. Do you have a website, or is it the Facebook group?
It is Writerpunk is a Facebook group.
So I can leave that in the description as well if anyone's interested.
Absolutely.
And again, thank you so much for your time. I look forward to working with you in some capacity in the future.
Thank you very, very much. I appreciate the interview, and I do hope you decide to submit to Writerpunk in the future.
Thank you. So that's it, everyone. I hope that this has helped you in some ways, giving you some insight into networking and indie versus traditional publishing. And I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.
Bye.